Power it up.
After 3 years since its last release, Medal of Honor is long overdue. After a dishonorable discharge from players and critics, the shooter went into semi-hibernation. But with all the cash on the table for military shooters, Electronic Arts could only let it sit out the fight for so long. Is there enough room in the foxhole for one more?
We're gonna need a bigger boat.
I am giving you 24 hours to get our forces into that valley.
While there are a lot of story elements in Medal of Honor, calling what's presented here a fully fleshed out tale is a bit of a stretch. It's all about being one of the military's elite Tier 1 operators, guns for hire who go into harm's way for the better good. What follows is a schizophrenic jaunt around Afghanistan behind the eyes of several different soldiers. While their paths eventually intertwine, there's little to hold it all together, minus the conflict between an overbearing desk general and a corporal on the ground looking out for his troops.
Their team leader and petty officer are requesting immediate reinsertion.
Negative.
Sir?
You never get to know any of the main characters, and so many acronyms are thrown around that some script passages almost need subtitles.
We left 2 men at the LZ.
Left.
Correct, but the helo aided their escape prior to getting hit.
It all amounts to a story that leans too heavily on our distaste for the Taliban and Al-Qaeda to make its point.
Get down!
The design doc for Medal of Honor must look more like a checklist than a collection of fully realized ideas, because it follows the blueprint of far too many games before it.
Go, go, go!
The campaign empties the full arsenal of military objectives onto the table. 1 minute you're taking over a military facility to set up your own, and the next you're taking out dug-in militants with a sniper rifle or spotting targets for air support.
Terminate.
There's no shortage of variety as you pilot ATVs or helicopters in addition to the oodles of foot soldiering that's required. The levels are almost 100% linear as you shoot down a path of invisible walls from one fray to the next. Weapon variety and authenticity is a high point, with many having alternate firing methods to discover and implement.
Rabbit, wait for a go.
But predictable enemy placement and behavior undermines it a bit. The competitive multiplayer options for up to 24 players are just as rote as the campaign, and there are just 4 modes to choose from. Combat Mission asks your team to complete a set number of objectives as the opposition attempts to stop you. Sector Control awards points for holding flags, and the team with the most points wins. Objective Raid asks one team to blow up objectives while the other tries to stop them. And Team Assault is your basic deathmatch. None of the options break much ground, and with just 8 maps to play on, longevity is a concern. The maps themselves are primarily small to encourage confrontation, but certain modes can only be played on a specific map, limiting the flexibility. There's a 3-class system in place for the multiplayer that includes Rifleman, Sniper, and Special Ops. You can go in and customize the loadout for each, but there are limitations based on the class. You're awarded experience for completing mission goals. These points then unlock new weapons and attachments for play, while ribbons and medals are rewarded for single game or career achievements. As you tie kills together into a streak, you're rewarded with tactical support actions like mortar strikes or missile attacks. They're nothing groundbreaking, but they're fun to use nonetheless. The lone design innovation is Tier 1 mode, where you try to complete campaign missions as quickly as possible with no checkpoints. You can upload your times to leaderboards, and your friends can even leave markers to show how far they've made it. It's a step in the right direction for a game that otherwise follows an already blazed trail.
Bogger, this is Colt 201. You seem to be taking some fire.
At 4 to 5 hours, the campaign is extremely short. Tack on a run-of-the-mill multiplayer, and you have a game that reaches the status quo, but doesn't extend much beyond it.
RPG, shit.
Bogger, Gunfighter 1-1, ETA is far for approximately 12 miles.
It's hard not to mention the Call of Duty franchise when reviewing games like this, and since Medal of Honor borrows the control scheme button for button, it's basically a necessity. The upside is that you can jump right in and be proficient. The downside is that it limits the gameplay's ability to leave its own mark. You get the full complement of controls, including the ability to go completely prone. One caveat is that the prone position cannot be used in multiplayer. Your mileage with this will vary, depending on how you like to play. Cover is handled a little better in that you have the ability to peek around corners to pick off enemies while limiting your exposure. It works well, even though holding a shoulder button to do it isn't ideal. The other addition is sliding into cover. In theory, it's a realistic part of combat, but the game has problems choosing which wall to slide into, which can put you in compromising situations. The ballistics engine is practically non-existent. Where you point your reticle is where your bullet lands, so you don't have to account for distance or wind.
Hit.
Hit detection is solid in single player, but a little finicky in multiplayer, despite the developers spending time on it after complaints arose during the beta. Enemy AI borders on moronic at times. They're more than happy to stay in one spot to get assassinated, or keep popping out of cover to be shot. Your teammates aren't much better. While they will actually drop some enemies here and there, you'll spend a lot of time waiting for them to reach mission trigger points to go forward.
It's a no-go. Moving to secondary LZ. Move!
Grenades are extremely rare and it takes far too long to toss one, but it doesn't change the fact that Medal of Honor is too easy. On the normal setting, you almost have to intentionally compromise yourself to die. The few choke points that do exist are only there because you haven't yet memorized enemy locations. Toss in an extremely generous auto-aim, and we recommend playing it on hard for anyone who likes any semblance of a challenge. Medal of Honor features nice gameplay variety, but very little of it is done with much creativity. A few additions are hit or miss, and the lack of difficulty doesn't help extend what is a brief, but well-paced campaign.
Thank you for flying Ranger 219.
Medal of Honor is like Jekyll and Hyde where presentation is concerned. It can look great at times and completely average at others. It features a crisp, clean look, but the lighting engine is weak, providing for some rough-looking shadows. It tries to be as cinematic as possible, but many of the engine-based cinemas don't allow for any sort of camera control, which limits immersion. In multiplayer, the detail is toned down even further. In some of the arid maps, things can get grainy and make it difficult to tell soldier from terrain. The set-piece moments are a little underwhelming when compared to its contemporaries, and the laughably bad explosions don't help much. One thing the game does well with is atmosphere. The music is absolutely incredible and lends a lot of tension to some of the situations. The opening scene will give you a new appreciation for what these Tier 1 folks do. Voice acting hits the mark for the most part, but the writing rarely allows the human element to creep in.
1-1, you just don't understand the brain of a warrior.
Brain?
For a franchise that's been missing in action, Medal of Honor is a solid reboot that shows a lot of promise. It manages to nail the tenets of its genre, but with few trimmings. It's so blunt in its approach that it makes many other military shooters seem fantastical in comparison. And while the level of reverence shows respect for the subject matter, it's aimed a little too squarely at military buffs. You'll feel like you're painting by the numbers as you paint targets, but if you're looking for a stopgap, it's worth calling into service.